Forgotten rancher saved Apache from wolves. Years later she returned as tribal chief. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin our tale. In the vast, open plains of the West, where the sun beat down relentlessly on the land, a forgotten rancher lived alone, his days blending into one another. The loneliness of his existence had become his only companion. The land he worked was rough, unforgiving, and he had long since learned to keep to himself, only talking to the cattle and the occasional traveler who happened upon his ranch. His name was Sam, a man whose past was as weathered as the barn he lived in. Many years ago, he had made a decision that changed the course of his life. It was a night unlike any other. A storm had rolled in unexpectedly, turning the river near his property into a churning, raging beast. Sam had been out in the fields when he heard the distant cries, a sound so sharp, so desperate, it pierced through the howling winds. Without a second thought, Sam spurred his horse toward the noise. What he found was a young Apache girl, no older than 10, trapped in the fierce current of the river. Her cries were lost to the roaring waters, and her limbs flailed helplessly as the river dragged her further away. Without hesitation, Sam dove into the cold, merciless water. The weight of his body struggled against the pull of the current, but the sight of the terrified girl kept him going. He reached her just in time, grabbing her and pulling her close, despite the freezing water that seemed intent on swallowing them both. He managed to pull her to safety, carrying her back to his ranch, exhausted but determined. He warmed her by the fire, wrapped her in blankets, and tended to her wounds. She was scared, trembling, but Sam could see the gratitude in her eyes even as she barely spoke. Her words were few, but they left a lasting mark on him. "I will remember," she whispered before falling into a deep sleep. Sam had no idea what her words meant at the time, but the promise stayed with him. The next few days were quiet. The girl recovered quickly, though she said little. After a week, she disappeared into the wilderness, leaving behind only a note written in simple words, "Thank you." Sam thought little of it, chalking it up to a fleeting encounter with a stranger in need. He returned to his solitary life, his thoughts drifting back to the cattle and the relentless work of maintaining his ranch. Years passed. Time did its work, erasing memories and healing wounds. Sam never expected to see the Apache girl again. But that was before the day the winds began to shift once more, bringing with them the echoes of the past. Years had passed since Sam saved the young Apache girl from the river. The memory had faded into the background of his life, like the endless horizon stretching across the plains. He had become accustomed to the silence of the land, the solitude that wrapped around him like an old coat. His days were spent working the fields, tending to the cattle, and living a life of quiet resignation. The world outside seemed distant, a place that no longer held much meaning for him. But everything changed the day a group of riders appeared on the horizon. Sam was in the barn, his hands covered in dirt as he prepared to mend a broken fence, when he noticed the dust cloud rising in the distance. At first, he thought it was just another group of settlers or travelers passing through. But as the riders grew closer, something in the way they moved caught his attention. They rode with purpose, their faces set, and their horses moving in unison. There were no smiles, no chatter, just a sense of determination in the air. As they approached the ranch, Sam stood up, wiping his hands on his worn denim jeans. He had never been one to shy away from visitors, but there was something about this group that made him uneasy. When they reached the gate, the leader of the riders dismounted and walked towards Sam, his gaze steady and unblinking. The man was tall, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years of hardship. He spoke in a low voice, one that carried authority without raising a single word above a whisper. "Are you Sam?" the man asked. Sam nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I am," he replied, his voice rough from years of disuse. The man extended his hand, and Sam hesitated for a moment before shaking it. "I have come for the girl you saved," the man said. Sam's brow furrowed in confusion. "The girl?" he repeated, unsure of what the man meant. The Apache girl, the man clarified. The one you saved from the wolves all those years ago. Sam's mind raced, the memory of the girl flashing before his eyes. He had almost forgotten about her, but now the recollection hit him like a wave. She's long gone, Sam said, his voice tinged with regret. She left after she recovered. I never saw her again. The man's expression softened slightly, though there was no warmth in his eyes. She did not leave, Sam, he said. She returned to her people, and now she is the chief of the Redstone Apache tribe. She has come back for you. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. The girl he had saved all those years ago, now a leader of a powerful tribe? It seemed impossible. Why? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man looked at Sam with a mixture of respect and something else, something that Sam couldn't quite place. Because she remembers what you did for her, the man said. And now she has come to return the favor. Sam stood there, staring at the man, trying to process the words. He had never expected this. He had never thought that the girl he saved would come back, let alone come back as a chief. His heart raced with a mix of emotions, surprise, confusion, and a hint of fear. What did this mean? Why had she come back now, after all these years? Before Sam could say anything more, the leader of the riders turned and motioned for him to follow. Come with us, he said. She is waiting. Sam hesitated for a moment, his feet rooted to the ground. This was a moment he had never prepared for. But something inside him told him that this was a chance to make things right, to confront the past that had haunted him for so long. With a deep breath, Sam mounted his horse and followed the riders. As they rode toward the heart of the Apache lands, the air seemed to grow heavier, filled with the weight of years of untold stories. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, this moment, was not just about the girl he had saved. It was about something far greater, something that had been waiting to unfold for years. The ride toward the Apache lands was long, and the atmosphere around Sam grew heavier with every mile. The landscape changed as they traveled deeper into the heart of the desert. The once flat plains began to rise into rugged hills, and the air smelled of sagebrush and dry earth. Sam could feel the weight of the past on his shoulders as he followed the riders in silence. He tried to gather his thoughts, but his mind was a storm of confusion and curiosity. The Apache girl. No, the woman, who he had saved all those years ago, now a chief. He had no idea what to expect, but the thought of facing her again made his stomach turn with nervous energy. As they rode through a narrow canyon, the sound of hooves echoed off the rocky walls, and the riders led Sam into a clearing. In the center of the clearing, a large fire burned brightly, surrounded by a circle of Apache warriors. At the far side, sitting on a raised platform, was the woman. Sam's heart skipped a beat when he saw her. She had grown into a strong, imposing figure, her once childlike face now full of authority and wisdom. She wore traditional Apache clothing, decorated with beads and feathers, and her dark eyes, now filled with years of leadership, locked onto Sam as soon as he entered the clearing. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful, and Sam felt a surge of emotions flood his chest. He could hardly believe this was the same girl he had saved from the wolves all those years ago. The chief's voice rang out clear and commanding. You've come. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the air feel thick. Sam dismounted and stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say or do. The memory of her scared, trembling body when he pulled her from the river seemed so distant now. I didn't expect this, Sam finally managed to say, his voice rough. She nodded, her gaze softening for a moment. Nor did I, she replied. But our paths were meant to cross again. Sam took a step forward, his boots crunching against the dry earth. He felt a strange mix of pride and shame, unsure if he was still the same man who had once saved this girl from certain death. You've become a leader, he said quietly, his eyes taking in the tribe around her. I never imagined. After all these years, I never thought you would come back for me. The woman's expression softened even further, and she stepped down from the platform, moving toward Sam with a slow, purposeful grace. I did not return for you, Sam, she said. I returned to thank you, to honor you for what you did. Sam felt the tension in his body ease slightly. She stopped just in front of him, her gaze steady. But what do you want from me now? Sam asked, his voice full of confusion. The woman looked up at the sky, as if searching for the right words. I came to bring justice, Sam, she said. You saved me when I was just a child, but I have learned much since then. My tribe has suffered, and now I must lead them. Sam's brow furrowed. What does that mean for me? He asked. What do you need from me? The chief's eyes locked onto his, unwavering. I need you to help me, Sam, she said, her voice firm. The land that we both live on is being threatened. There are those who wish to take it from us. I need your strength and your knowledge to fight for what is ours. Sam felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He had spent so many years running from his past, from his mistakes, and now, it seemed like fate had dragged him back into the struggle he had long tried to avoid. The woman's gaze was full of determination, and Sam could see the fire of leadership in her eyes. She wasn't just a girl he had once saved. She had become someone who commanded respect. He had never imagined that the path he had taken so long ago would lead him here, to this moment of reckoning. I don't know if I'm the man you think I am anymore, Sam said, his voice filled with doubt. But if it's justice you need, then I'll stand by you. The woman's expression softened, and she placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. Then together, we will fight, she said. For the land. For our people. For the future. Sam looked around at the warriors who stood at attention, waiting for their chief's command. He felt a sense of resolve wash over him, and for the first time in many years, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The past had come full circle, and now, he had a new purpose. He was no longer the forgotten rancher, isolated and lost in his own regrets. He was a part of something important, something worth fighting for. The sun was low in the sky as Sam stood beside the chief, looking out over the camp. The Apache warriors were gathering, their movements steady and purposeful. Sam had only been with the tribe for a few days, but already, he could sense the difference between the life he had known and the life that these people had built. There was a strength in them, a quiet power that came from generations of survival. Sam had learned quickly that the Apache were not just fierce warriors, but a people bound by loyalty, honor, and a deep connection to the land. The chief, Ayana, had given him a place among them, but there was more at stake than just his own redemption. The land was in danger, and Sam knew that if they did not act soon, they would lose everything. Ayana stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon, as if she could see the trouble that was brewing. They will come for us soon, she said, her voice steady, but there was an underlying tension in her words. Sam nodded, his jaw tightening. He had seen the threat firsthand. The settlers from the nearby town had been growing bolder, pushing further into Apache territory. They wanted the land, the resources, and they were willing to fight for it. But Sam knew that the Apache were not a people who would back down without a fight. What do we do? Sam asked, his voice low. We prepare, Ayana replied. We have the land, we have the strength, but we need to be united. This is not just a fight for our survival, but for our future. Sam could see the fire in her eyes, the determination that had carried her from a frightened child to the leader of the tribe. He felt a surge of respect for her, but also something else, something deeper. She wasn't just a chief to him. She was the embodiment of everything he had come to admire in the Apache. The next few days were spent preparing for what Sam could only describe as a battle for their lives. Ayana led the tribe with a calm authority, organizing the warriors, strategizing their movements, and ensuring that every member of the tribe was ready for what was to come. Sam helped where he could, offering his knowledge of the land, his experience with cattle, and his skills as a marksman. Though he had not fought alongside others in years, he felt a growing sense of purpose. As the days passed, the tension in the air grew thicker. Sam could feel it, the anticipation of something inevitable. They had set up camp in a place that offered them a clear vantage point, and they waited for the settlers to make their move. Ayana had assured him that they would not be caught off guard. But Sam still felt the weight of doubt creeping in. Could they really protect the land? Could they stand against the settlers and their growing numbers? It wasn't long before the answer came. One morning, as the first light of dawn spread across the sky, the sound of horses' hooves echoed in the distance. Sam's heart raced as he looked to Ayana. She stood tall, her eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. They're coming, she said quietly. Sam felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he readied his rifle. The Apache warriors were already in position, their movements silent but swift. Ayana gave a signal, and the camp went still. The settlers were getting closer, and Sam could see the dust rising from their horses' hooves. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. As the settlers approached, Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the rifle in his hands. He glanced at Ayana, who was standing beside him, her face calm but resolute. She had prepared them for this moment, but Sam knew that nothing could prepare them for what was about to happen. The settlers were not just coming for land. They were coming for a people's way of life, and that was something worth fighting for. Sam tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes focused on the approaching riders. This time, he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something much larger, for justice, for the Apache, and for the future that they all deserved. The first shot rang out, a loud crack that echoed across the plains, and the battle began. The Apache warriors moved swiftly, their arrows flying through the air, hitting their targets with precision. Sam joined the fray, his rifle finding its mark as he took down several of the settlers. But as the battle raged on, Sam couldn't help but feel that the stakes were much higher than just a skirmish. This was about more than land. It was about the survival of a people, a culture, and a legacy. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the Apache warriors held their ground, pushing back against the settlers. Sam fought alongside them, his resolve growing stronger with every shot, every movement. And through it all, Ayana led them with unwavering strength, her voice carrying across the battlefield, guiding her people toward victory. In the end, it wasn't just the settlers who were defeated. It was the idea that they could take what was not theirs. The Apache had fought not just for their land, but for their right to live freely, as they had always done. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Sam stood at the edge of the battlefield, his rifle still in hand, eyes scanning the horizon as the smoke from the fight began to settle. The Apache warriors had fought with honor and skill, repelling the settlers and driving them back. But Sam knew that this victory was only temporary. The settlers would return. They always did. The tension in the air was palpable, and Sam could feel the weight of what had just transpired. The sound of hoofbeats broke the silence as Ayana approached, her face set in determination. She had led her people through the battle, guiding them with a calm authority that Sam had come to admire. But now, as she drew closer, Sam could see the toll it had taken on her. Her expression was somber, the fire of battle still burning in her eyes, but there was also a deep weariness, a burden that she carried as the leader of her people. "We have won today," Ayana said, her voice steady but low. "But this is not the end. They will come again. And next time, they may not come alone." Sam nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The settlers had been driven back, but they were not the only threat. The government, the lawmen, the land-hungry men who wanted to claim the Apache's territory, all of them were a constant shadow, lurking just beyond the horizon. "What do we do now?" Sam asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the future. Ayana turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "We prepare. We defend our land, our people, and our way of life. But we do not fight blindly. We need to be strategic, not just strong. The battles we face now are not just on the field. They are in the hearts and minds of those who would see us erased from this land." Sam stood in silence for a moment, taking in her words. He had seen the strength of the Apache warriors, the courage they had shown in the face of overwhelming odds. But he also understood that Ayana's words held the truth. They could not rely on strength alone. They needed to outsmart their enemies, to use their knowledge of the land and their resourcefulness to win the war, not just the battle. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked alongside Ayana and the Apache warriors to prepare for the inevitable next wave of settlers. They reinforced their defenses, set traps, and established communication lines with other tribes in the region. Sam had never been a strategist, but he quickly learned the importance of patience and planning. He spent his days training the younger warriors, teaching them how to use the terrain to their advantage, and sharpening his own skills as well. As the days turned into weeks, Sam found himself becoming more and more integrated into the tribe. He had once been an outsider, a man lost in his own regrets, but now, he was becoming part of something much bigger than himself. He could see it in the eyes of the Apache warriors, the respect they had for Ayana, and the way they looked to her for guidance. But more than that, he could feel it in himself. He was fighting not just for survival, but for a future that he could believe in. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Sam sat with Ayana by the campfire. The firelight danced across her face, casting shadows that seemed to deepen the lines of age and experience. For a moment, they sat in silence, watching the flames flicker and crackle. Finally, Ayana spoke, her voice softer than it had been in days. "You have become one of us, Sam," she said quietly. Sam met her gaze, surprised by the weight of her words. "I never thought I would be," he replied, his voice low. "I was just trying to survive. But now, I see what you mean. This fight is more than just about land. It's about our people, our history, and the future we want to build." Ayana nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We are not just defending the land," she said. "We are defending our stories, our traditions, and everything that has come before us. Our ancestors fought to protect this land, and now it is our turn to carry that responsibility." Sam felt a surge of emotion as he listened to her words. He had never thought of it that way before. For the first time, he understood the true depth of what the Apache were fighting for. It was not just about the land. It was about preserving a way of life, a culture that had survived for centuries. "I'll stand with you," Sam said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll fight for this, for all of you." Ayana's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of gratitude. "Then we fight together," she said, her voice full of conviction. "And together, we will protect what is ours." As the fire crackled between them, Sam felt a sense of purpose settle into his chest. The fight ahead would not be easy. The settlers, the lawmen, and the government would come for them again. But Sam knew, with Ayana leading the way, they would be ready. The Apache had always been survivors, and with their strength, wisdom, and unity, they would continue to fight for their land, their people, and their future. The days following the settlers' retreat were filled with tension. Sam, alongside Ayana and the Apache warriors, spent every moment preparing for what was inevitable. The settlers had learned their lesson, but Sam knew their thirst for land wouldn't be quenched so easily. In the distance, the dust clouds were rising again, this time not from settlers, but from a group of well-armed soldiers who rode in formation, their purpose unmistakable. They were here for the Apache. The land was now officially under threat, and this time, there would be no turning back. Sam had seen many things in his life: wars, betrayal, survival, but this felt different. The Apache were not just fighting for land or territory. They were fighting for their very existence, for the future of their people, and Sam knew that it was a battle that would decide everything. "They are coming," Ayana said one morning as they watched the horizon from a high ridge. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, but Sam knew better than to mistake it for indifference. She was prepared, as always, and her resolve was unshakable. "We've seen their strength before," Sam replied, his tone heavy. "But this time, it's different. They have the law behind them. They have the power of the government." Ayana nodded, but there was no fear in her eyes. "We fight with what we have," she said simply. "And we fight for our people." It was a message that resonated with Sam. The Apache were not the invaders here. They were the ones who had been pushed to the edge for too long. The land, the traditions, and the way of life that had been passed down through generations were worth more than any amount of money or land that the settlers or soldiers could ever offer. As the soldiers approached, Sam stood with Ayana and the other warriors, each of them poised, ready for the battle to come. There was no room for hesitation now. The moment had arrived, and they would meet it with everything they had. The soldiers marched into view, their heavy boots pounding against the earth as they rode forward. Their leader, a tall, stern-looking man, dismounted and walked toward Ayana. He was wearing the uniform of a military officer, his face hardened from years of service, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he had seen his fair share of violence. "Chief Ayana," the officer called, his voice loud and commanding. "I come to deliver a message." Ayana did not flinch. She met his gaze with steady eyes, her posture unwavering. "And what message is that?" she asked. The officer's eyes hardened. "You and your people are to leave this land. You've been given ample time to vacate. If you do not comply, we will be forced to take action." There was a coldness in his voice, but Ayana did not back down. She stepped forward, standing tall in the face of the officer's threat. "This land has been ours for generations," she said, her voice calm but full of authority. "We will not leave. We will defend it with everything we have." The officer's face twisted into a sneer. You may have the strength of your warriors, but it won't be enough. The government's orders are clear. You will leave, or you will be removed by force. Sam stood beside Ayana, feeling a surge of anger. He had fought for survival his entire life. But this was different. The Apache were not just fighting for land. They were fighting for their heritage, their culture, and their future. He knew that this moment would define everything. You may have the power of the government, Ayana said, her voice cold and unyielding. But we have something stronger. We have the right to our land, and we will fight for it. The officer glared at her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, then prepared to face the consequences. With that, he turned and signaled for his men to dismount. The Apache warriors readied themselves, and Sam could see the fire in their eyes. They were not afraid. They had faced far worse than this. The battle that was about to unfold would not be easy, but Sam knew that Ayana was right. They were not just fighting for their land. They were fighting for their lives, for their families, and for the generations that would come after them. The Apache would not back down. The soldiers might have the government on their side, but the Apache had something far more powerful, the unbreakable bond of their people, their traditions, and their resolve to protect what was theirs. As the first shots rang out, Sam felt a surge of adrenaline. The battle had begun. There was no turning back now. The future of the Apache, and the land they called home, was on the line. The battle had erupted with a ferocity that Sam had never experienced before. The Apache warriors were swift and deadly, using the terrain to their advantage as they launched ambush after ambush. But the soldiers, well-trained and disciplined, were determined. The clash of metal and the sound of gunfire filled the air as both sides fought fiercely. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. The stakes had never been higher. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of the Apache people, for Ayana, and for the land that had been their birthright for centuries. He moved with precision, his rifle steady as he took aim at the soldiers. He could feel the weight of every shot, knowing that each one could make the difference between victory and defeat. Ayana was by his side, leading her warriors with a calm yet intense focus. She wasn't just a chief in title, she was the heart and soul of the tribe. Her voice rang out, sharp and clear, giving orders, coordinating the warriors with a level of strategic brilliance that Sam had come to admire. It was clear that this was not just about fighting back. It was about reclaiming what was theirs. As the battle raged on, Sam saw the soldiers begin to falter. Their lines were breaking. The Apache had pushed them into a corner, using their knowledge of the land and their guerrilla tactics to gain the upper hand. But Sam knew that the fight was far from over. The soldiers might retreat now, but they would be back, more organized, with reinforcements. He could see the desperation in their eyes as they tried to regroup. The Apache had proven their strength, but the soldiers had the numbers, and the government's power was not something to be underestimated. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the battlefield, and Sam looked to his right, only to see a group of soldiers charging toward Ayana's position. Without hesitation, Sam moved into action. He rushed forward, his heart racing, the sound of hooves pounding the earth beneath him. The Apache warriors, seeing the danger, quickly responded, but Sam knew they were too far outnumbered. He reached Ayana just as the soldiers closed in, and with a swift motion, he drew his sidearm, taking down two of the soldiers in quick succession. But there were too many, and he could see Ayana's expression harden as she met the oncoming soldiers. She was not afraid. The fight had reached its peak, and now it was about to determine everything. She unsheathed her knife and leapt into action, cutting down soldiers with swift, practiced strikes. Her warriors followed her lead, each move calculated and precise. Sam fought alongside them, his rifle working in tandem with the Apache's skill and agility. The battle was a whirlwind, chaos swirling around them as they fought with everything they had. For every soldier that fell, it felt like a small victory, but for every Apache that went down, Sam's heart tightened. They couldn't afford to lose anymore. With every passing minute, the situation grew more dire. Sam could see that the soldiers were starting to regroup, their commander barking orders to rally his men. They were making a last push, and Sam knew they would either succeed or fail in this moment. He felt a surge of determination. This could not be the end. The Apache had endured too much, had fought too long to let this battle be their last. Just as the soldiers advanced for another assault, Ayana's voice rang out, commanding and strong, calling her warriors to regroup. Sam, breathless and soaked with sweat, followed her lead, positioning himself in a better spot. He knew that if they couldn't finish this fight now, the Apache would be left vulnerable to a larger assault in the coming days. The battle continued, but Sam felt a strange shift in the air. The soldiers, seeing the fierce resistance, began to hesitate. They had expected the Apache to falter, to break under the pressure, but Ayana had led them with a strength that defied expectations. Slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. The soldiers were falling back, their morale shattered as the Apache warriors surged forward, pushing them off the land they had no right to claim. Sam looked over at Ayana, his heart swelling with pride. She had not just led them through the battle. She had shown them what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. As the last of the soldiers retreated, the Apache warriors stood tall, victorious. The battle had been hard, but they had won. Sam took a deep breath, his body aching, but his spirit stronger than ever. He had fought beside Ayana and her people, and for the first time in years, he felt like he had a purpose. The Apache had won this battle, but Sam knew that the war was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But as long as they stood together, united by their cause, Sam had no doubt that they could face whatever came next. The days after the battle were a time of reflection and recovery. The Apache warriors had fought with unwavering resolve, but the toll of the fight had left its mark. Sam, though relieved by the victory, couldn't shake the feeling that this war was far from over. The soldiers might have retreated for now, but Sam knew they would return. And the next time, they wouldn't come alone. He spent his days helping Ayana and the warriors rebuild, tending to the wounded, and fortifying their defenses. But every night, as he lay under the stars, his thoughts turned to the future. The Apache had won this battle, but the settlers, the government, and the lawmen were not finished with them. Sam felt a deep unease, a sense that the peace they had fought for was fragile, like a thread stretched too tight. As the sun began to set one evening, Sam found himself walking along the edge of the camp, the familiar scent of sage and smoke filling the air. He looked out over the land, the same land that had been home to the Apache for generations. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also full of danger. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You are troubled," Ayana said, appearing beside him. Sam turned to face her. She had always been a source of strength, her presence a steady anchor amid the chaos of their world. "I'm worried," Sam admitted, his voice rough. "We've won this fight, but I don't know how long we can hold out. They'll come again, Ayana. I don't know if we're ready." Ayana stood in silence for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You are right to be worried," she said quietly. "But we will never be ready for the forces we face. We can only do what we can, and we will do it together." Sam nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. They had the strength to fight, but they needed more than that. They needed allies. As if sensing his thoughts, Ayana spoke again. "We cannot win this fight alone," she said. "We must seek the help of other tribes, others who understand what we are fighting for." Sam knew she was right. The Apache could not face the settlers and the government alone. But convincing other tribes to join them would not be easy. There were long-standing rivalries and old wounds between the tribes. It would take more than just words to unite them. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. His mind raced with possibilities. How could they convince the other tribes to stand with them? What would it take to bring them together? He knew that Ayana was right, but he also knew that forging these alliances would be dangerous. There were risks in trusting other tribes, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The next day, Sam and Ayana rode out to meet the leaders of neighboring tribes. The journey was long, the landscape growing more rugged as they moved through unfamiliar territory. Along the way, Sam couldn't help but notice how different the world felt now. The land was still beautiful, but it was also a place of struggle and hardship. Every inch of it had been fought for, and every inch would be fought for again. When they reached the first tribe, Sam was greeted with wary eyes. The leader, an older man with a stern face, did not speak at first. He simply looked at Sam and Ayana, sizing them up. "You asked for our help," the leader said finally. "But what do you offer in return?" Ayana met his gaze without hesitation. "We offer our strength, our unity, and our resolve, she said. The settlers, the soldiers, they will not stop. But if we stand together, we can drive them out. Together, we can protect our land and our people. The leader remained silent for a long time, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. Finally, he spoke. You ask for much, and you offer much. But trust is not easily earned. Sam felt the tension in the air. He knew this was just the first of many challenges they would face. But he also knew that this was the only way forward. They had to unite, or they would fall one by one. After a long, tense silence, the leader nodded. We will stand with you, he said, his voice firm. But know this, we do not. Trust lightly. Prove your resolve, and we will fight by your side. With that, the meeting ended. Sam and Ayana rode back to their camp, their hearts heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The alliance had been made, but it was fragile. It was a beginning, but it was far from enough. Sam knew that the battle for the land, and for the future, was far from over. They had gained one ally, but they would need many more if they were to survive. As they rode through the night, Sam felt a sense of urgency settle over him. They had won a victory, yes, but that victory had only bought them time. The true fight was just beginning, and the Apache would need all the strength, unity, and allies they could gather to win it. The days that followed the alliance were filled with both preparation and anticipation. Sam, Ayana, and the Apache warriors now had new allies by their side, but the journey ahead was still treacherous. The settlers had been driven back once, but the government's reach was long, and their forces would return. It was a battle not just for the land, but for the right to exist as they always had. Sam rode alongside Ayana, her steady leadership guiding them through every step. As they gathered more tribes to their cause, the Apache grew stronger, united in their shared purpose. But as the days turned to weeks, the sense of urgency became more palpable. The government's army was getting closer, and every moment spent preparing was one less moment to prepare for the coming storm. Sam had never been a strategist, but Ayana's quiet confidence gave him strength. She had led them this far, and now she would lead them through the final fight. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Sam looked around at the faces of the warriors, the men and women who had pledged to stand with them. Their faces were hard, determined, but there was a sense of fear behind their eyes. The stakes were higher now. This was it. Ayana spoke, her voice steady and calm. Tomorrow, we meet them on the field, she said. We stand together as one. This is not just about land. This is about our people, our future. Sam nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had thought about what this fight meant. For him, for his redemption, but he realized now that it was more than that. It was about a way of life, about something that had been passed down through generations. As they prepared for the final battle, the air grew thick with tension. Every warrior knew that they could not afford to lose this fight. If they did, their way of life would be erased, and the land that had been home for centuries would belong to those who saw it only as a resource to be exploited. The morning of the battle came quickly. The sky was overcast, and a chill hung in the air as the Apache warriors took their positions. Sam stood beside Ayana, his rifle in hand, ready to fight alongside the people who had become his family. The soldiers approached, their uniforms dark against the gray sky. They were not alone. Reinforcements had arrived. The battle that was about to unfold would determine everything. Sam felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, but this time, it wasn't fear that surged through him. It was a sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something worth more than his own life, for the Apache, for Ayana, and for the future that they all deserved. The clash began with a deafening roar as the Apache warriors surged forward. Arrows flew, and the sound of rifles echoed through the valley. Sam moved with precision, his rifle steady in his hands as he took aim at the soldiers advancing toward them. The Apache were fierce, but the soldiers were well-trained, and their numbers seemed overwhelming. Yet, the Apache had something that the soldiers could not match, a unity forged through years of struggle, a bond that no government or army could break. Ayana led the charge, her voice cutting through the chaos, commanding her warriors with unwavering resolve. Sam followed her, his every movement driven by the knowledge that this battle was not just about winning. It was about survival. The battle raged for hours, the Apache warriors fighting with everything they had. The soldiers, though disciplined, were beginning to falter. They had underestimated the strength of the Apache, and now, as they struggled to maintain their position, the tide of battle began to turn. It was clear now that the Apache were not just fighting for land, they were fighting for their existence. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the battlefield, Sam saw the soldiers begin to retreat. The Apache had pushed them back, and the soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, started to fall back toward their camp. The victory was not yet official, but Sam could feel it in the air. The Apache had won. The soldiers were retreating, but Sam knew this was not the end. The Apache had made their stand, but the fight for their future was far from over. As Ayana stood beside him, watching the soldiers leave, Sam felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. The Apache had proven their strength, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt that they could stand tall in the face of adversity. They had fought not just for the land, but for the right to live as they always had. And that, Sam knew, was a victory worth fighting for. In the days that followed, the Apache continued to rebuild, strengthening their alliances and preparing for whatever the future would bring. But as Sam looked around at the faces of the warriors, he knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They had proven that they could withstand the fiercest of storms, and with Ayana's leadership, there was no challenge they could not overcome. The land was still theirs, and for the Apache, the fight for their future had only just begun. Discover the gripping tale of bravery, survival, and unity in this epic adventure of Western stories. Follow Sam, a lone rancher, as he finds himself fighting alongside the Apache tribe to defend their land against relentless settlers and government forces. With stunning landscapes and fierce battles, these Western stories show the unbreakable bond between a man and a tribe, standing together to protect what they hold dear. From the harsh realities of the frontier to the unyielding courage of the Apache, each chapter unveils the complexities of loyalty, heritage, and the fight for freedom. Through strategic alliances and incredible leadership, Sam and Ayana, the Apache chief, lead their people into a fierce battle that will determine their fate. The story weaves together timeless themes of perseverance and survival, where every decision shapes the future. These Western stories offer a unique perspective on the Old West, showcasing both the struggles and triumphs of a people determined to preserve their way of life. The intense journey of these characters offers a powerful narrative that resonates with fans of Western tales and historical fiction. Whether it's the call to arms or the strength of unity in the face of adversity, these Western stories will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end.